Everybody, please welcome Terry Dodson.
How you doing, man? Doing good.
And Terry, we were just saying before you jumped in that although the panel is mainly to discuss, at least per the description, Harley Quinn and Deadpool, I noted that I know you guys from so many other things, so we're going to, kind of talk about whatever people want to relative to your careers. I assume you're cool with that.
Sounds good.
All right. So just in keeping with your point, when you and Rob created Deadpool, he was a fairly serious character, right? He was just an assassin at first. He had some quips, and then I think Joe Kelly and some other people kind of took it to the breaking the fourth wall and being more of a comedic character. And I guess I would, from my vantage, say that it kind of did a nice full circle back to the movies where they still do that, but it was without ignoring the humanity of the character, and it wasn't just a one-note slapstick comedy of the film. So, would you agree with that characterization, and was that an important component to your enjoying of the film, that it got back to sort of center?
Well, what you just said parses out 20 years, roughly, of a character's development, and I would take issue with the very initial thing you started off with. He was always meant to be a villainous character who was a mercenary for hire who lived in Cable's world. I gave him the voice I gave him out of sheer boredom on my part and desire to do something different with the cliche. The only reason that we didn't get to explore more of that cliche is because he didn't have a monthly book. Mm-hmm. He appeared as a running subplot in Rob's first year, and that was the first year that was juggling multiple storylines, but also with a writer, a plotter, an artist who was planning to leave the book he was working on, and we all knew that he was planning to leave the book. So what can you do in dialogue versus what do you want to do with a character in the stories in which he's appearing? And the first limited series is the first opportunity I had wholly and solely to really determine aspects of the course of the character, and I would postulate that all of the grounding for where he's going to evolve and grow started there, all right? And not the least of which is my ability to throw as much in there about his origin as I was allowed to by editorial, because don't forget, it's an editorial office that at that time believed that you never solve anything because you'll lose your readers, which led to 500 storylines that were never getting resolved.
Right.
Out of fear of resolving anything. So we were always allowed to introduce storylines. We were just never allowed to resolve them. And I wanted to show him without his mask in that miniseries. I wanted to delve a little bit more into why he went to Weapon X in that miniseries, and all of that. I was directly told to hold on, don't do too much too quickly, let's parse it out. Okay, let's parse it out. So my second limited series was his origin, why he went, what happened to him, the horrors that he went through, blah, 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 blah. That second limited series, Fabe, you didn't write that second limited series. Exactly. The whole proposal got rejected by editorial because they said it was too depressing. Yes, Deadpool's origin was too depressing.
Right.
And that was that was 95, and guess what? You can calculate, the math is really easy to see when I left Marvel. and one of the 3 or 4 things that were the nails, because you can't nail a coffin down with just one nail.
Right.
A few of the nails in the coffin, that was absolutely one of the biggest ones, that I wasn't allowed to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And Mark Waid did his miniseries with Ian Churchill, where Deadpool is having a relationship with Siren, who's 15, 20 years younger than him, but that's besides the point.
Right.
They didn't think about things like that back then. So, the genesis that was always there. My next time writing Deadpool was 2004 with Cable and Deadpool #1, and that first page of that first issue was written without having read any of the work that was done before that. I purposely did not want to, because I did not want to be colored negatively or positively by anything else that had been done before. I knew I wasn't going to be contradicting anything necessarily. So I started reading Joe's run by issue 4 or 5. Once I got my feel for it, and then I read Joe's run, and of course it was really good because Joe's a really good writer, but I said, there's nothing here outside of the fact he's a little darker than I am, and he was working with a monthly solo Deadpool book, and I'm working in a conjoined, oddly, weirdly conjoined book. So there's different writing parameters involved, but the character's voice was very, very solid, and I felt comfortable because that was my voice.
Sure, sure. I want to actually come back to that in a minute, which is the idea of fan expectations of a character versus the expectations put on by a creative team or the editors and their motivations. But first, Terry, to bring you in. So again, the topic of the panel was at the outset Deadpool and Harley Quinn. So let's go back to your work on Harley. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Harley was created in the Batman the Animated Series as a character, and then ported over to the comics. So when you all did the book, was that sort of the one thing that I find interesting relative to those two characters is that you could argue that they're two, if not the two, breakout modern day big two comics characters in the sense that if you look at most of the flagship characters even today, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, what have you, have existed since either the Golden or the Silver Age. But these two in particular were able to break through the modern comics world and become tentpole IP for the big two, if you would. So when you guys were taking on Harley Quinn, was there a recognition at the time that she was potentially a massive character that would carry forward to where she is today?
I know that when I got the phone call to be offered the Harley book, in my sketchbook I'd been drawing Bruce Timm Harleys. So there was something, at least as an artist, there was a zeitgeist, some kind of a cultural thing that Harley Quinn was a really cool character, and I couldn't wait to draw her. And so I was, at that point, just drawing Bruce Timm-ized versions of the character, because that's what there was. So I just knew that there was a blank slate as far as the DC universe went, that there was a great character to work on with a ton of potential. I mean, so much fun. I think at that point, the DC Batman books were all really linked together, and there's all these series, and there's so much storylines going on that it was kind of tough to break into, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of just, I don't know if fun's the right word, but just a story you can just hop on and read and just enjoy without having it tie into the entire universe. And Harley was that character because we could make it a Gotham City book, not so much just a Batman book. So we got to play with all of Gotham, which as a fan myself, I was much more interested in playing with that whole Gotham universe and how Harley Quinn interacts with all that stuff because she had never been there, but from seeing all the stuff that we had seen in the cartoons, we knew the potential of how this character, this kind of a little more fun, feminine version of the Joker, how she interacts with these things as opposed to the deadly kill you Joker approach. I think we were all really excited about the character. I think everybody involved, that from the writer through to the even the letter, was excited about working on the character.
When you're working on a title, and again, you've done a ton of iconic characters, does it ever surprise you, sort of now that we're in 2017, which characters or which runs are the things that your fans most hold dear? I mean, do you ever reflect on that and think, because at the time I'm wondering if, would you have felt any different about that than say anything else you're working on, like an X-Men run or the Defenders run, but just that certain characters or arcs stay with you or the fandom? Does that do you ever think on that and what that?
Well, yeah, and this is now my 25th year, so I actually have stunning. I can look back and see that's like a career there now.
Sure.
Out of the blue, and you coming to shows like this, people bring up books and you talk. This is the book that got me into comics. This was my favorite work you've done. This is my, this is my favorite version of Spider-Man. So it's interesting to see that there's these 5 or 6 key moments in your career that that people really glom onto. It's whether it's Harley or whatever else it is. And I do think that whatever those main things that people like that I did, I know that was the most fun that I had working in comics on each one of those particular storylines. And obviously, the more fun I'm having, the higher quality of work I'm going to produce because I'm working on. I'm happy, and it's amazing when the artist is happy, the creator's happy, how much more they bring to the book. Because we're all professionals, we all have a certain skill level, but now you put something enthusiasm behind that skill level, and it really reflects on the pages.
So on that front, Fabian, you've been doing some work in the last few years on Marvel's custom side, or I guess DC's as well, right? You're doing custom comics, and then Terry, I think you have a creator-owned book with Fraction coming out, right? Adventure Man.
Yes.
So again, when I think of those two things, probably different parts of the career arc, but But I think what they have in common is you both get a chance to work with, whether it be editors or creators that you know and trust and they understand your work. How important is that at this point in your careers to be able to craft and choose who you work with versus earlier in your career when you probably didn't have that optionality?
For me, it's I take the assignments that I'm offered when Marvel or DC offer assignments, and for me, it's not regular books anymore, or monthly books, and I completely understand how that how that reality works. But the editors who are offering me the work to do, 9 times out of 10 are friends of mine for 20 years, and I know that they need something that I could bring to the table for them. So mostly I'm doing it for that, or the character involved is interesting. All right, I'm doing a Black Panther thing right now for Marvel. That I don't get to write Black Panther very often. Okay, that's interesting, and I know that the editor asks me because he knows what I bring to the table is an understanding of how to work with client relations and to client needs and all of this stuff, which I guarantee you 90% of the more mainstream writers, the current mainstream writers, wouldn't really, they have a much harder time doing it. So that's why I do it. But I mean, comics have been a secondary part of my career for over 15 years now. So I tend to take assignments that interest me or I know are just ludicrously challenging, absurdly difficult things to do. And those are the ones I really regret taking when I'm halfway through them.
Right.
But I take them because of the challenge. And I'm working on a creator-owned digital project right now. Once we sign the contracts, which should be in the next week or two, actually, they're going to announce in San Diego.
Great, congratulations.
But I've been jerking around with that for almost a year and a half. But it's been me that hasn't pushed to get it done more than anything.
Right.
I needed a bit of a brain break from thinking about having to do comics on a regular basis, and I've taken that. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to the digital project because I have found in the last 5 years I enjoyed working digital format more than regular straight print format because I find that it offers you a lot of opportunities to do different things visually, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Terry?
I think mainstream-wise, I've been in a position for a while that there was a point in my career, I guess, where enough jobs were coming in that I could pick and choose between those jobs, and the creators I worked with. Initially, it was the characters, and then it's who you're working with, because at some point you've kind of drawn everybody. Everybody on your list has been drawn, and so then it's what are we doing with this character? How is the company approaching it? Are they going to be behind it? If the company's enthusiastic about something, they give you a schedule that's reasonable, so allows you to do your best work, and that you can put the best team, and everybody has enough time on it. Makes a huge difference. Me doing creator-owned work is just the basis of my interest in comics and art in general. So I came in from the Star Wars angle, not the Marvel or DC angle.
Right.
I saw Star Wars as a kid, and that got me into drawing. And from that, I started buying comics and stuff. And so my interests were always, I love superhero comics, but I loved Star Wars comics, or I loved independent comics, especially growing up in the 80s where there was such a wide range of comic book stories.
Yeah, were you a fan of like the black and whites and stuff as well?
Yeah, it was really cool. I'm from Oregon, and Dark Horse Comics is from Oregon. And I was about 13, 14 when those started coming out, and they're black and white, and so it was really cool to see that there were all these creator-owned things at that time being done by people near where I lived, and then Dark Horse started publishing European reprints of stuff, and so that opened up my eyes to all this whole other world of comics, it's always something that I kind of planned on doing, was just doing my own work that was outside of Marvel or DC, because as much as I enjoyed that and still enjoy doing it, they're still fun characters to work on. There's nothing like creating your own stuff, because you have this lifetime of movies and cartoons and books and experiences you have, and you're looking for some opportunity to explore those further. And the first thing I did was in 2002, I got approached by Humanoids, which is a French company.
Right.
And they offered me this book that took place in I mean, there's never a date, but it's approximately the 1890s, and I'm a huge fan of old Golden Age illustrators and painters and architecture, and so I was like, holy cow! I was like, all this stuff that I like that I've never in my life been able to use on drawing Spider-Man, I can use on this book, and it's just like that just totally opened doors for me as far as like as being a creator, as far as
And what book was that?
that book. In the French name is Song.
Right. Okay.
The U.S. name is Muse.
Right. Okay.
And that was actually cool because in Europe, artists color their own work, and so that book was the first book that finally, after a decade working in comics, I could color my own stuff. Taught myself Photoshop in that book. Worked exclusively. I scanned my own pencils. So Rachel, my wife, inks all my work, but that was a project that I did entirely from pencil to color myself. So.
You aced out the wife from the equation.
You told her to take a break for a couple months.
She couldn't be happier.
Right.
She'd much rather be doing something else.
Right.
Rachel, my wife, who inks me, is the 9-to-5er. She's perfectly happy
Yeah.
to work 9 to 5 and go play the horse.
So since you brought Rachel up, I've been curious to ask you. This is the first time we're meeting. Did Rachel? Did you meet her through the business? Like, so were you two together before she became your inker, or did that come first?
Actually, when I met Rachel, she was a painter.
Okay.
So doing these giant wildlife paintings, which were totally awesome. It's like, man, so we had a lot in common from the beginning. It wasn't until I started working, like a year or two into working, I hooked her up with someone as an assistant inker because she was such a talented artist. It's like, man, we can do something with this. And it's like a year or two later, it's like, hold on, let's quit sending this stuff out to New York or to wherever. Let's just keep it now. It's because you're doing such a great job.
Right.
And she's obviously a phenomenal inker. But it's nice, and I think for our relationship and the health of our working relationship as well, that she loves the artwork, but she's not a gigantic comic book fan.
I see, right.
We're not discussing.
She's very professional about her approach.
Exactly.
Right.
It is 9 to 5.
Although Terry, by the way, is the only penciler in the industry who doesn't complain constantly about his inker.
I tell you what, man, my artwork.
No, she's great. She's great.
No, she is great, and B, it's amazing as an artist when you have confidence in your inker.
Sure.
Or whoever.
Yeah.
How much better you
Like
become.
Mike and with Laura coloring his work. I mean,
Exactly.
that must. Yeah.
Yeah, your comfort level is so high with the person following you up,
Right.
that you keep producing better and better work, and that's put me where I'm at today. And it allowed me to actually pencil a book,
Right.
and then color it myself without an inker because my work had gotten to that level.
So we don't want to monopolize. So hopefully, y'all have some questions for these two gentlemen. I don't know. Does anyone know? Do we have mics for the crowd? Anyone?
We can hear.
Okay.
We can hear everybody if you speak
Questions,
up.
anybody? While we're waiting for questions, I believe you had mentioned to me, and I found this fascinating, that Fabian was the writer on your first X-Men book. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Was it X-Men or X-Force? Which did we?
We did.
Which did we do an X-Men
X-Men
issue?
39.
That was it.
Airplane World War II issue.
Do you remember the
I
story?
remembered the X-Force issue we did, and I couldn't remember the X-Men issue. And then I realized that we had done one of each,
Very
right?
close, yeah.
No annuals, though, right? No,
Yeah.
that was Ringo. Okay. I am old, and I lose recollection of details because I was doing 7 books a month and working a full-time job. So the details went with the hair.
That's true. If you ever want to have a moment of clarity, like, I don't know if you guys do this, but you should just look at your respective careers on Comic Book DB. I don't know how many of you know that website, but it's an amazing resource if you're ever wondering what creators that you may like, what else they worked on. It's pretty crazy how many books you all have done, just for the record. Hard to prepare for this, to be honest. So who has questions for the audience, for these two guys? Sir?
This question is for Fabian. I've always been fascinated by that period in like 92, 93, the talent vacuum, once Seven left Marvel and then you took over writing my X-Men. Now, how was that for you as far as like the transition going from, you were doing like Deadpool stuff, working with Rob, now you're on adjectiveless X-Men, like you're the guy. What was that transition?
Not as complicated as you might think, because it wasn't like we got pushed off a cliff. We knew what was going on, and out of those 7 guys, 5 of them pretty much kind of stopped the work they were doing and left. And the 2 that kind of lingered were Jim and Rob, and they were working on the X books, which made, and I was in the office every day as part of my job as an editor at that point, not even advertising manager. I was an editor already at that point. So when you're in the office every single day and a lot of things are happening all around you anyway, that's just one of the many things that are happening. So it doesn't have that same level of immediacy or urgency, because tomorrow's another day and there's going to be another bombshell or something like that, you know? We knew this was happening or going to happen from the second that Rob put an ad in Comic Buyer's Guide for exterminators. And he immediately got contacted by Marvel's legal department, and he pulled it and said, okay, learning experience, now I know how far I can poke them, because that's exactly what he was doing, was poking. So from the minute that happened, we knew that this was percolating, but we didn't know the depths or the extent to which it was being done. And my personal take on it 25 years later is I never begrudged them doing what they were doing and why they were doing it. I begrudged the way some of them went about doing it. and Rob and Jim are the two guys I'm really talking about, because cut bait and switch, poop or get off the pot, you know? They were dragging it. And Rob, are you plotting the book or not plotting the book? Are you drawing the book? Well, no, not so much after issue 8 if you look, and not so much before issue 8 if you look. So you gotta really sort of like realize that becomes a month-to-month frustration. So me taking over X-Men or me becoming sole writer on X-Force wasn't like a shock. I didn't walk in the office one day and Bob says, guess what, these guys just left. It was actually months of getting to that point. So it really was to the point where, let's go already, get the hell out of here, and let's us do what we got to do, and you do what you want to do. And my big problem with it is that I still believe to this day that they purposefully waited as long as they could, because A, they were hedging their bets because they were nervous, and I totally understand why they would be. What they were doing are there little children in the audience? Took cojones of steel, okay, to do what they did, all right? And children, if you want to know what cojones is, just come to my booth later and I'll tell you. But for the same token, they also knew that we had a major crossover coming up, and they were supposed to be the architects of that crossover. And the longer they lingered, the less there was an architectural structure for a 12-issue, 3-month crossover. And no shock that the weight took just to the edge of that cliff of being able to turn that work around with new artists on schedule. That was a frustration at the time. It lingered about a month because we had work to do. You know what I mean? But it was still annoying at the time because we understood the game that was being played.
So you opened the door for something interesting to talk about. So going back to when Image got started, then Image went through a period where I would say, for whatever reason, again, whether it was mismanagement or just the cycle, most, I would say, top-tier writers and artists were fearful of doing creator-owned for a while. And then we had the, I guess what's now known as the Kirkman Manifesto, if you will, and Image was doing some good books up to that, but the success of The Walking Dead, and I don't know if you know, but Kirkman made this video where he implored creators at Marvel and DC to take a chance on going to do creator-owned work. And at the time, it was very controversial, but I think fast forward to, about 5-6 years since he made that video, we live in that world now. I think creator-owned is a viable, probably arguably as successful as it's ever been of a model that we've seen since the early Image days. So the thing that's interesting to me is that as a writer, I've always said there are lots of writers that can straddle both because you can write more than one book in a month. But for an illustrator, it's a huge risk because if you go to do an Image book and it flops, that's massive amounts of lost income and potentially relationships with editors. So Terry, to your extent, you did the Red One at Image, and again, you have Adventure Man coming. Is part of your comfort and willingness to do that because you're just at that point in career? Or is it also that, again, Image is now a much more established working model where you know that you're going to do at least reasonably well at this point because it's a more proven out model in the system?
I think I kind of lucked out because I was going to be doing this anyways. The French book that I did just started it. I knew from that point on that's what I was going to be doing was my own stuff. And seeing the Kirkman thing happening as I was already I was already gearing up. I think that was, I'm trying to remember the year. It was approximately 2010. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. And at that point, the Red One proposal was already, I'd already.
Okay, okay.
The Red One was proposed to me in 2009. It shows you how long these things take. And then Matt and I established Adventure Man in 2010.
Okay.
Which would have been right at the same time as that Kirkman
So
thing.
it's that far back? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's me working at Image. Seems like it's a new thing, but it's
Okay.
been going on just because Marvel. I between 2009 or 1999 and 2013, I was under contract between Marvel and DC exclusively the entire time. But my last Marvel contract, and Marvel's awesome. They treated me terrific. But that last contract just took me X number almost a year longer to fulfill that contract, and in that time, all my stuff got pushed back. Which pushed back. When you're doing your creator-owned stuff, these things all hinge on these other things that are happening, and so
Right.
That's all just been pushed back that much farther. So it'd been nice to have this stuff go out a couple of years ago because that's when it should have.
Right.
But so, anyways.
Yeah, okay. Other questions? Here we go. Okay, gentleman in the back with the glasses.
Thanks. I think we had a really good lead time on that book, and even at that time I was like a 10 book a year guy. I mean, that was my pace, and I think that you're just seeing that where I think someone had to come in for half an issue maybe or something in order to. I think there was, let's just say in the first 12 issues I drew 95% of those first 12. I think someone came in for half an issue there and maybe half an issue somewhere else, and then we had a bump and a month off for the 13th issue, and I drew the bulk of the rest of those issues. So actually, the schedule was pretty good. But that was my human schedule, and actually, I hit the limit of my human schedule on the Harley Quinn, because if you look at issues 14 or 15, somewhere in there, I drew so much that I could no longer hold a pencil, and I actually went for like 3 to 6 months without drawing. Well, I switched from right hand to left hand, but I had my inker was the same, but I drew left-handed for like about 3 months.
Like
before
for the
that
first
hand
time
got
ever?
tired.
Like that? Really?
Yeah. Well, when that hand started hurting, I started writing with my left hand to kind of see what I could do.
Okay.
Seriously?
That's crazy.
No, and I'm I write left-handed, but I throw right-handed.
Same.
But I can't write right-handed.
Agreed.
And I really can't throw left-handed either.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I can throw fine right. How do you draw with
It's
either
insane.
hand?
I would say that's like the mother invention thing. You know, it's like if you can't, your career, your life depends on it. Pretty soon you can do it. I mean,
I know Stephen King can type with his feet, but I didn't know that you could draw with your.
You heard it here first. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't fun. I mean, it was a lot of work, but with my same inker, the clarity of the line was there with her inks. Obviously, my draftsmanship and my knowledge of anatomy and my design is in my head. You know, the rest of it's just practice.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I know.
Terry's left-handed stick figure.
For fun, do you draw an issue left-handed now once a year for fun?
And Rachel does the whole thing, and Terry's like, yeah, I drew with my left hand.
Man.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
That's good. Who's up next? Sir.
Question for both of you guys. What's like a least favorite character for whatever reason that you guys had to work on?
Wow. I've done so much crap. It's really, really hard to just pin down one single crap. Probably at the time as much as in hindsight, but more so in hindsight, working on NFL Super Pro was, it's the typical example of doing something for someone and not getting rewarded for it.
Right.
Although I did get rewarded for it. But I did an editor a favor, and the job was more annoying than it needed to be. And then I thought I was done. I thought it was Al Pacino in Godfather 3 with one shot. And then they asked me to do the first 4 issues. And it wasn't a freelancer situation because I'm in the office every day, and these are my friends, and one of them is my boss, and he's asking me to do something that I don't really want to do, but I'm kind of taking one for the team. And then it ends up dogging you for decades afterwards. So, that one's always a little frustrating. The other side of the coin, though, guys, is that comics sold a hell of a lot of copies back then. So NFL Super Pro is a 5-figure royalty check, which anytime I say that to anyone, their face about thinking they can be smug about making fun of me for NFL Super Pro sort of drops,
Right.
So it's like, oh, yeah, and there you go. So.
Obviously, I always look at it as a challenge when I
Right.
get given something that I'm not
Yeah.
enthused about, and I just try to make it the best I can. But I know, there's.
There was an X-Men issue and an X-Force issue that I hated doing, wasn't there?
No, I like the challenge. I like
Right.
the challenge. No, it's I try professionally. I try to look at it as a challenge, and obviously I try to be on projects that I know. But yes, I've taken one or two for the team. I will.
Who's
say.
the hardest character you've had to draw where after having to draw them on multiple pages, you're like, oh, I don't want to draw this character again?
Boy. I blank. I'm blacking them out.
Or maybe the maybe the oddest. I know maybe the oddest commission request you've ever gotten.
Thousands of them.
Is there?
They're all odd anymore.
All right.
I'm gonna question them all.
All right.
Yeah.
Who's up next? Sir, back there.
Yeah, this is a trite question, but I've always wondered what it's like when you see a product of the pen make it to the product of Hollywood. Does it meet your expectations when something gets on screen? How do you feel about it?
From my standpoint, I was thrilled with how the Deadpool movie came out. I think it's a really difficult character to translate to film, and I thought they did an excellent job. Because of and despite the budget that they had, they did an excellent job. And I also saw it for the first time at the New York City premiere with everyone there, all the actors, all the writers, the director, everyone. And I'm thinking, what if this sucks? What do I? Actually, I'm sorry. I wasn't worried if it sucked because I know I've been to a couple of premieres where if the movie sucks, everyone just slinks out real quick and goes like this. I was at the DC screening of Green Lantern with all the DC employees, and I'm not kidding.
Shots fired.
I went to go see it with Kevin McGuire, who's an artist and a friend of mine, and we leave the theater, and I go, let's get out of here, because these are friends of mine, and I've known them for years. I don't want to see them, because I know how much it must hurt to do that. And he says, no, let's sit down and look at their faces as they walk out. And me being the humanitarian that I am, go, all right, let's sit, there's an empty couch here. So we actually, and I'm not kidding, we sat down and we watched everyone leaving the theater, and their faces were just ashen. So if it sucked, I could leave quickly and go make my train and get home in time, right? But what if it's just okay? What if it's a C or a C minus? You spent 10 years of your life trying to get this movie made and it was only okay. Then what do you say to these people afterwards? Good job, But luckily, everyone loved it because it was so great. So it felt really, really good. And I love the merchandise. I think the majority of the merchandise is on target. It's on message. I hate taco stuff, so please don't bring me taco stuff. There's a reason for that, but I hate taco stuff, so I don't want to see it. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with how they've managed to extrapolate something so odd and turn it into this sort of cultural zeitgeist, which is about rebellion and anti-authoritarianism when it's actually about a mentally deranged guy.
Right.
Right.
So Terry, I mean, for you, I guess I'll just piggyback off that and say, not only what did you think about Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad, but also what did you think of the Wonder Woman movie? Because you were on the one of the bigger reboots of that character as well.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's the two things that I thought of that can compare is, I mean, it's cool just having a Harley in a film. But I mean, personally, I enjoyed the treatment of Wonder Woman better. I mean, the Harley Quinn in the movie is great for who she is. She's not who I see as Harley
It's
Quinn.
an odd movie to put her in, too. It's an odd way to debut a character in a movie of that.
And obviously, she
tone and
kind
scope.
of broke out in that film because she's such a great character. And I mean, honestly, I'd prefer her with a little bit more clothes on. I mean, I'd make it slightly more family friendly. I mean, even though she's psychotic. but still, the Wonder Woman, I really thought they did a great job of bringing something more to the character that I think out of the Superman, the Batman, and the Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's the one character you felt like you actually could believe in. She actually has a purpose. She's driven for some reason that you actually can believe in. I think the Batman and Superman recent adaptations, the Snyder versions, it feels like you're not really sure who you're rooting for, but the Wonder Woman character at least feels like you're rooting for. And the costume and the use of the lasso and the acting of Gal Gadot is
I haven't
it's
seen
incredible.
Wonder Woman yet.
But she's she brings something to that role that it makes you believe in her. I think, and so I can criticize all the comic book related films for certain things here and there because you're critical of everything as an artist or creator. You're always criticizing. That's your job, is to study stuff. But there's so much great stuff in there too that it was really cool to see.
Yeah.
Her. I mean, when I saw that lasso on screen, I was like, man, I've been drawing that forever. It's so cool to finally see that thing do what I could see in my head. And
Right.
Happen well. That's
yeah,
I want to see the movie. Is it good? I heard it's good.
Yeah.
It's excellent. It's excellent.
I do want to mention I had a tremendous rooting interest watching Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, but that was rooting for the credits to start rolling. So I was really rooting for that to happen, and when they happened, I was able to get up and leave as quickly as
you
possible.
think about this Batman Superman movie. When Wonder Woman showed up on screen, it's like all of a sudden there was a film. There's something you cared about.
Right.
I mean, at least for a little while.
Well, because it almost looked like she was having a little bit of fun.
She was having fun.
A
Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
just a little. That's all we
I
want
know.
is a little bit of
I know.
fun.
There's no reason to go off character and be goofy or anything.
Our superheroes have only had a little bit of fun for 75 years. We can,
Yeah.
we can have them have that on screen for 2 hours.
And you can see that, at least with Wonder Woman, how popular that character. It was just a character that was just meant to be exposed to the world again, because the 70s had Linda Carter, and they just haven't figured out a way. And maybe it was just technology or time, or I don't know what, but
It's also a lesson in that fake news exists in entertainment as well, because the Wonder Woman film there were so many rumors about it being just terrible and recuts, and it just shows you that those kind of things should be put in the back burner, and we should judge works for what they are and not what we think they're going to be going in. So, okay, I think we have time for one or two more. So, sir.
Just wondering if there was a project that came across your desk at some time over the expanse of your careers where, for whatever reason, time, material, content, you said no. But now that you see where it is today, you wish you'd said yes.
Interesting.
Well, not so much now where I see where it is today. For me, I mean, it's just assignments that I said no to because I was already doing so much. I had an opportunity to write one of the Spider-Man books and chose not to, kind of out of sheer arrogance, which in hindsight I was an idiot for, and I regret not having done that because I would have really have enjoyed a nice solid couple-year run on a Spider-Man book. Especially now that I'm older and I can look back on it. So there were things I got offered a lot. I mean, there was the thing with editors in a feeding frenzy at a company that has to produce as much work as Marvel was producing back then is that you become everyone's easy default. If you hire this person, whether it's an artist or whether it's a writer, you know that you got a relative amount of butt coverage in the office and your bosses and your ability to produce the work, because that was also important. You can hire someone, and I did as an editor. I hired artists or writers that I really wanted to try to work with, and they were absolute nightmares about turning work in and being able to produce monthly schedules. So I got asked to do a lot because everyone assumed that I could do it. And they assumed that because I was doing it. And they didn't even necessarily seem to care much about the quality, which, was destroying me at the time I was even doing it. But they kept. I got asked to do a lot of stuff back then, and I turned a lot of it down. I turned all of it down except for the ones you saw me, in credits. Could have done Silver Sable. That would have been interesting. So. Other than that, that's it. Spider-Man's really the one big one for me.
Terry?
Yeah, I mean, being an artist, my time is limited.
Right, yeah.
Once I take on
Like
something
you
else,
said, 9 or 10 issues a year, basically.
You can't draw 7 books a month with a full-time job, Terry.
the thing is, the bad thing is,
Rachel can't bail you out of that.
I know I would. The thing that's held me back in a way is my desire for quality. You know, it's like I could do more.
That never helped me.
Yeah, you learn. I don't know. I learned painfully. I think that what I could handle, and then there's always ones you got to pass up. But you're passing up because you've already committed to something that you think is the thing
Sure.
you're going to be doing.
And it's for artists, it's such a physical as well as emotional investment that you have to be able to live with this choice for months and months and months, because you don't usually have the luxury of being able to set something aside. And on Tuesday I could be, if I'm doing 2 monthly books, let's say, on Tuesday I could write book A, because I know on Wednesday I can write book B. And you can't do that as an artist. And a lot of people don't seem to realize the amount of focus and concentration that it takes to draw, monthlies or just in general. But it's just it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I know that doing this last couple of years, doing more creator-owned stuff, where I've broken it up since I'm kind of out of the spotlight on books for 6 months to a year at a time. That whole time I'm doing like 3 or 4 books covers a month for Marvel or DC, which is fun because it's like, I can draw these characters I really like. I can just
On a cover.
For a couple of days, I get my chance to really shine on it, color it myself. But then, coming back to my own books and then keeping that focus it's a fine line with my schedule to do the cover work and then to do my own stuff. It's balancing that. I've gotten fairly good at it because I overcommitted on both ends at times, and I've learned pretty quick. This is what I can handle. I look at my schedule the rest of the year, and I know exactly it's these 3 cover assignments plus this book, and that's what it is.
And for me, writing's become a lot harder than it ever was before in my life.
And why is that?
In my life, not just my career. In my life, I think as I've gotten older and I've done so much more non-comic work, that work tends to be very very academic and narrative and marketing driven, and it tends to exhaust me. So my brain would rather watch sports or binge another show on Netflix than focus and concentrate on the nuts and bolts and grunt work of writing, structuring the story, the pacing it, beating it out, all of that stuff. The actual writing itself, once all of that has been accomplished, is easier. But the reason it took me so long to do a creator-owned book is not because I didn't believe in creator-owned work. It's because I was too lazy to get up and do it.
Well, the other thing is now there's so much noise, so much distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to focus for all of us.
Yeah.
We all have our phones and the internet and everything. And streaming television, and there's just so much going on all around us all the time that turn all that off and just focus on your work. And that's in the last couple of years I've really seen how that's affected me. And you forcibly just have to unplug yourself to get work. If I know I need to get X amount of work done, I just have to unplug because it just will not get done.
I've tried that, but then I'm really annoyed that I'm not plugged in.
Yeah.
And I'm really annoyed that I have no distractions so that I'm supposed to focus on the work.
Right.
I find that really grating that I have to focus on the work. So I look at the dog, go, "You want to go outside, honey? That's right. You want to go out, honey? Come on, let's go outside." And she's like, "I don't want to go out again."
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, sir.
Fabian, you were on Thunderbolts a long time. A lot of people think about Kurt Busiek when they think Thunderbolts, but you had a long run and it was coming out twice a month.
For a little part of it, yeah. Look, they think about Kurt Busiek, Thunderbolt, because Kurt Busiek invented the title. He created the title, and that cliffhanger from that first issue can't be beat and maybe never will be beat, right? So he's justifiably thought of when people mention that book. But if you're talking about quantity of work, I completely kick his butt. I mean, because he wrote 33 issues, I think, and I wrote 70-something,
Right.
you know? But it was staggered because it's one of those fortunate books I got fired off twice. so it was between Thunderbolts and Robin for me. I've gotten to write Tim Drake Robin twice, and the book has been canceled both times. I'm hoping to get to write it again because
Third
how
time's the
often
charm.
can you cancel a book 3 times?
Right. Yeah.
What?
I love the Robin.
You?
I like the Robin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I like the Robin, too. I like that Robin. I like Dick Grayson's been my favorite character since I was 6 years old, and I came to this country and we saw him on TV in the Batman TV show. But I love Tim Drake, too, because I think that what Marvin Chuck Dixon especially did with him was phenomenal storytelling over a long period of time for Chuck, especially. Chuck wrote over 100 issues of this character.
Right.
So getting to write him, as silly as it sounds, was actually a career highlight for me. The first time I wrote him, I knew the book was going to end. We knew Robin was going to be canceled when I got hired, so everything was done in service to that. The second time, we didn't know. A little something called New 52 booted us in the butt when we weren't ready for it. So I didn't want that to get canceled because I could have easily and comfortably have written that book for another 5, 10 years, to tell you the truth. I had enough to go for a long time. That's why I want to because I want to just go right back to where we were before New 52, as if the last 5 years haven't even happened, and then have it get canceled again.
What about you, Terry? Do you have anybody left, any characters that sort of from childhood or just that you love that you haven't had the chance to do?
I get asked that a lot, but I honestly, I think what I generally say is it's all the new stuff that I'm creating. That's me.
Yeah.
That's,
Okay.
I've drawn every single Marvel and DC character that I'm really aware of. I've been able to go into Star Wars twice, but
Right.
it was really my childhood thing. And I've been able to work on European books, which was a childhood kind of youthful thing I always liked. And
So you're good.
yeah,
You're all set.
I
You've
mean,
never drawn Super Pro, though.
that's true.
You've never drawn NFL Super Pro. Someone please hire Terry to do a commission of NFL Super Pro.
We'll start a
so that
we'll
he
do a
can want to
Kickstarter.
end
We'll
his
do-
career.
All right, we've got
Draw
two.
it with your feet. Train your feet to draw NFL
I think we've
Super
got 2 or 3 minutes left. So anyone else with a question? Back there.
David, you alluded to something at the start that always has annoyed me in this industry, and that is where really talented creators like yourself suddenly find that their phone isn't ringing as much. And you alluded to it in your career that it hasn't been your focus for 15 years. I'm not asking it for you specifically, but in general, why is it that creators are hot and then they're cold?
Well,
It's not like they lose their talent.
I take umbrage to you calling me any kind of a good creator, number one. Number two, my phone rings a lot, but a lot of it is actually just solicitation calls. And number three, the reason I started to do other things in comics is because I was fully aware of the reality of the business. It happens to everybody, but it happens to writers a little more than it happens to artists. Because if you can draw well and you can draw on schedule, you're a commodity. Not in a negative way. You're something of value to them. The reality of it is that generational shifts happen on the editorial level at Marvel and DC, and they tend to hire people based on their generational affiliation. And it's not even ageism necessarily, because there's plenty of writers who are my age who do regular mainstream work for Marvel and DC. Mark Waid does, Peter David does, but there's more editors who are less likely to want to use you, you know, because they'd rather use their own generational pool. And you can also see that by the propensity for them to hire the same writers as they can. So that you look at Marvel's roster or DC's roster, and you'll see a lot of the same names popping up in a few different books, you know? And I wouldn't say any of their names because that might presume that I'm disparaging them. I'm not at all. It's just the complete nature of the cycle. I had to have taken over for someone else in order for me to have gotten the writing work that I did, right? I mean, there were writers who were writing those other 4, 5, 6 books or whatever they were before me. So, you know, I understood that whole process. I did. And I personally never saw in my mind, my life was not necessarily to be a writer. I always wanted to write, but once I started at Marvel, once I got a job at Marvel, my real desire would have been to be editor-in-chief or publisher. So once that wasn't going to happen, then I became a freelance writer for real. And I had to figure it out. And I even tried being editor-in-chief and publisher of Acclaim for 3 years to see, to kind of make up for that, but it wasn't going to make up for it. So that's why I started to do non-comics things, because I did not want all of my focus to be on an industry that I knew that I was not going to be able to be as engaged in as I would want, not the least of which you do have to write 2, 3, 4 books a month in order to make a certain standard of living that you may need to pay your bills and pay your mortgage and put your kids through college and all of that stuff. Getting to do 4 books a month is not easy for anybody. 2 books a month for writers is tough nowadays. So I also realized that the revenue wasn't going to be there, the money wasn't going to be there. So I started doing other stuff, and it keeps me interesting. I mean, keeps things interesting for you.
All right, last call for questions. All right, well, I think then we are out of time. So big round of applause for both Fabian and Terry.